Alright guys, let's get into this $30 budget deck. This is the brand new Dark World structure deck that just came out. Kicking things off, we've got one copy of Rainbow Overking of Dark World. You can special summon this card from your graveyard by returning one level 7 or lower Dark World monster that you control to the hand, and then if this card is discarded to the graveyard by card effect, you can add one level 5 or higher Dark World monster from your deck to your hand, except Rainbow Overking of the Dark World. Then, if this card was discarded by your opponent's card effect, you can special summon one level 4 or lower Dark World monster from your deck to or graveyard to either field. So again, really good for a lot of your plays. Then we've got triple copies of Grapha, Dragon Lord of Dark World. This card is a must at 3, because you can special summon this card from your graveyard by returning one Dark World monster that you control to the hand except Grapha. If this card is discarded to the graveyard by card effect, target one card your opponent controls, destroy that target. Then, if this card is discarded from your hand to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect, you can look at one random card in your opponent's hand. Then, if it was a monster, you can special summon it to your field. It's really good because it is just a really big beat stick, and its effect's pretty good as well. Being able to look at your opponent's hand potentially is amazing, and then ripping a card out of it and summoning it to your field is awesome. Then we've got 3 copies of Genta. This card is definitely a must at 3, because you can only special summon Genta once per turn, and you can discard this card to the graveyard and add the Gates of the Dark World from your deck to your hand. If this card is banished and you control a Dark World card, you can special summon this card. So that effect will come up a lot, and there's actually some pretty cool combos you can do where you can discard Genta, get Gates to the Underworld, then banish it, and then immediately after it's banished, special summon it, which is actually really awesome. And then you can just push for OTKs as well. Then we've got triple copies of Snow. This is like a Stratos for the deck. If this card is discarded to the graveyard by card effects, if it was discarded from your hand to the graveyard by your opponent's card effect, you can target one monster in your opponent's graveyard and add one Dark World card from your deck to your hand, then special summon that target, if any, in defense position. Plus, it's also a level 4 monster that you could use to special summon off your Rainbow, which is pretty cool. And I've got 3 copies of Silva. This card I was thinking maybe just playing at 2 instead. But if this card is discarded to the graveyard by card effect, special summon this card. Then, if it was discarded to your graveyard or from your hand to your graveyard by an opponent's card effect, your opponent places exactly 2 cards from their hand to the bottom of their deck in any order. This is really cool because this does go with ripping out your opponent's hand as long as they make you discard it, which is really good because if you're going first, or even if you're going second, having your opponent discard 2 random cards is just really good. And then lastly, for our Dark World monsters, we have 1 copy of Brow, Huntsman of the Dark World, and 1 copy of Parl, Hermit of the Dark World. Brow lets you, if this card is discarded by a card effect, draw 1 card, or if it was discarded from your hand to your graveyard by an opponent's card effect, you draw 2 cards. So it's basically your Pot of Greed, which is really cool. I'm only playing it at 1 right now. Maybe you could put it at 2, but I probably wouldn't go any higher than that. And same thing with Parl, Hermit of the Dark World. If this card is discarded to the graveyard by card effects, you can target 1 Dark World monster in your graveyard except Parl, special summon it to either field. Then, if this card was discarded from your hand to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect, you can special summon it to either field, one of your Fiend monsters that's banished or in your hand or graveyard. And you can only use this effect of Parl once per turn. That's it for our Dark World monsters. Next up, we've got the Danger package. I'm playing three Bigfoot, two Thunderbirds, double Mothman, and the one Tsushinoko. I find this ratio is actually not too bad because you're not necessarily like overclogging with the danger monsters, even though they are really good. Bigfoot lets you reveal this card in your hand, and your opponent randomly chooses one card from your entire hand. Then discard the chosen card, and if this card is discarded, if the discarded card was not Danger Bigfoot, special summon one Danger Bigfoot from your hand, and if you do, draw one card. If this card is discarded, you can target one face-up card your opponent controls and destroy it. You can only use the effect of Bigfoot once per turn. So again, really good with this deck. The fact that you can trigger any of these cards and get your Dark World cards discarded is amazing. Tsushinoko, same thing. You can reveal it, and one card gets randomly chosen and discarded. Then, if the discarded card was not Tsushinoko, special summon Tsushinoko from your hand, and if you do, draw a card. If this card is discarded, you can special summon this card. You can only use this effect of Tsushinoko. Mothman, if this card is discarded, or is not discarded rather, you can special summon it and draw a card again. If it is discarded, you can have both players draw a card, then both players discard a card. And then Thunderbird is really cool because if this card is discarded, you can target one set card your opponent controls and destroy it. So again, all the danger monsters have the same primary effect of having you draw a card if they are special summoned. So that's really good in terms of advantage. And then it's really good in terms of being able to discard and trigger off your Dark World monsters. Moving on to the spells, we have triple copies of Dark World Dealings. This card is definitely a must at 3. You get to draw a card and then discard a card. So again, it's good to trigger off your Dark World monsters. Not much more to really say about that. Then I've got 2 copies of Puppetry and 2 copies of Archives. I'm considering maybe putting Puppetry up to 3 or Archives up to 3, but I do have them in the side deck for now. So Puppetry lets you target up to 3 cards in any graveyard and banish them, then discard one Fiend monster. And then during your main phase, except the turn that this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card from your graveyard and target one of your banished Fiend monsters and add it to your hand. You can only activate one Dark World Puppetry per turn. This is also a quick effect, so it's really good in that sense. During your main phase for Archives, you can discard one Dark World monster, and if you do, Dark World monsters you currently control gain attack equal to the level of the discarded monster that you had in your hand times 100 until the end of this turn. If a monster whose original type is Fiend is discarded from your hand by this effect, or by the effect of Dark World card or an opponent's card effect, even during the damage step, you can discard one card, then draw 2 cards. You can only use each effect of Archives once per turn. So again, I might bump both of these up to 3. It really does kind of depend. This is like another Pot of Greed for the deck, and then your Dark World Puppetry is a banish effect, which is really awesome as well. So again, reasons why you might put them to 3, it's just kind of depends on if you know your matchups or if you want the extra draw power. And then we've got triple copies of Accession. This card, again, only having a 3-card extra deck, you do want to see it, and it's an easy way to get out all 3 of your fusion monsters. So during the main phase, fusion summon one Fiend fusion monster from your extra deck by banishing materials mentioned on it from the field or graveyard. And if fusion summoning a Dark World monster this way, you can also discard monsters as material. During your main phase, if this card is in your graveyard, you can add this to your hand. Then discard one Dark World monster. You can only use each effect of Dark World Accession once per turn. Again, really good. Like I said, you can get out your Dark World monsters. You can also discard your Dark World monsters to be able to use their effects, which is amazing. And then lastly, for our spells, triple copies of the Gates of Dark World. All Fiend monsters gain 300 attack and defense, and once per turn, you can banish one Fiend monster from your graveyard and discard a Fiend monster, then draw a card. Again, this works really well with your Genta, because you can use Genta's effect to get Gates of Dark World. You can activate Gates of the Dark World, and then if you have Genta in your graveyard, you can activate it, banish your Genta, and basically be able to discard another card and draw a card, as well as being able to get your Genta back on the field, and basically just continue from there, which is actually really cool. And I find that part of the synergy for the deck is really neat. And then lastly, moving to our traps, we have triple copies of Skill Drain. Don't really need to explain this. Having it at 3 is really crazy. It really just stops your opponent's cards and effects and stuff, because a lot of your Dark World monsters trigger in the graveyard, which is amazing. So your Skill Drain doesn't really affect that. And then lastly, we have one copy of Dark World Punishment. So when a monster or monsters would be normal or special summoned, you can negate the summon, and if you do, destroy that monster or monsters, then discard one Fiend monster. And then if a Dark World monster or monsters you control would be destroyed by battle or an opponent's card effect, you can banish this card from your graveyard instead. You can only use each effect of punishment once per turn. I was considering maybe playing this at 3, just because it is a counter trap and it is pretty good in terms of being like a Solemn Warning or Solemn Judgment, as well as protection. But I find 1 is fine. Moving on to the extra deck, we have triple copies of your Grapha Dragon Overlord of Dark World. This requires Grapha Dragon Lord of Dark World and 1 Dark Monster. When your opponent activates a monster effect or a normal spell or trap card, while you have a card or cards in your hand, quick effect, you can activate this effect, and the activated effect becomes your opponent discards a card. You can only use this effect of Overlord of Dark World once per turn. If this fusion summon card in its owner's control leaves the field because of an opponent's card, you can special summon one of your Grapha Dragon Lord of Dark World that is banished or in your graveyard. Then each player with a hand discards a card. Again, really good because you're able to get your boss monster out there, and then trigger off a lot of different Dark World effects, as well as reborning your Grapha, which is like your other main deck boss monster. And then I made a bit of a side deck. It's still a bit of a work in progress, and I'd probably change a lot of things from it. We've got 3 copies of Ceruli, 2 copies of Brow. Ceruli is really cool because if this card is discarded to the graveyard by card effect, special summon this card to your opponent's field in defense position. And then if this card is special summoned by the effect of a Dark World card, your opponent discards a card. So again, it's all about limiting your opponent's hand size, which is just really cool. Again, Brow, don't really need to explain it. But if anything, you either cut this from your side deck, or you play 2 of them in your main deck. Right now I do have it at 1 in my main, as you saw, but again, this is just a rough side deck to give you an idea of what you can do with the cards from the structure deck. And I've got triple copies of Paleozoic Dinomischus. Again, this is another card that really just allows you to be able to discard cards in your opponent's hand or discard your own cards to be able to activate your Dark World effects, which is really awesome. And then it can just keep coming back, which is really cool as well. We've got triple copies of Deck Devastation Virus. Again, a lot of this stuff is really situational. It depends on the decks you're playing. So, tribute one dark monster with 2,000 or more attack. Look at your opponent's hand and all monsters they control and all cards they draw until the end of their third turn after this card's activation. Destroy all monsters with 1,500 or less attack. Just really good in terms of being able to know what your opponent has or is going to have. And then it ruins some decks. Next up, we've got triple copies of Drag Down into the Grave. Both players reveal their hands. Each chooses one card from their opponent's hand. Then you discard the chosen card. And then both players draw one card. So again, really good because you can use this to get rid of your opponent's cards. Even though they do draw one, you can still trigger off your Dark World monsters. And then lastly, again, these three spots, one puppetry, one archives. These are more, again, situational depending on if you know what you're playing or not. And then the one card destruction, really don't have to explain it. This lets you trigger off a lot of Dark World cards if you have them in your hand. And yeah, that's pretty much what I've come up with. Again, like I said, I'll probably tweak it a little bit. I might play this budget variant for a bit, but I don't know, we'll see.